4 children ranging from 21 to 2 years of age. And I am happy to be here today, happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I look forward to adding value to what you know as far as your science knowledge. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about it.
That's okay.
We're talking about the love of science in this first question, and I want to know who inspired you to get into the sciences and to have a career in science.
Does it matter who goes first?
Yeah, either one of you.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I've always had a passion just to help people. I've started out from wanting to be a teacher to a nurse to even being a veterinarian, even a surgeon. So I guess, just going through different jobs and I guess God's will and the desire that he's placed in me to actually become the scientist, because I always said eventually I am going to be a scientist. I don't know exactly what type, but I will be one day. And so he just kind of led me into that path that I am in now. But I think my whole drive or what led me is just the desire to want to help people and just the passion I have to always want to reach out and take care of people and the want to know the why and how things work and on a scientific level. So I think that's primarily my take on what led me here.
All right, Swicker.
For me, it's my inquisitive nature that initially sparked the interest in science for me. I tend to ask a lot of questions, no matter what the situation is. But for me, it was the curiosity of how things work, particularly with biology. I had a particular interest in biology. And I think just coming up through grade school, I was fortunate enough to be nurtured by a village who kind of pushed me forward and encouraged me to pursue whatever it was, whatever interest it was that I had. I tell the story often when I speak to groups of people that my initial job that I thought I was going to have was a hairdresser. I was bad in high school doing hair. And when I told my dad what my plans were, he shot that down immediately. And he was basically like, this is something that you already know how to do. I'm not going to invest money in you to do it. And I had been volunteering some hours and eventually got a job working at a veterinary hospital. And so I decided to pursue science in that way after that. And the rest is, as they say, history. So
I'm glad you mentioned your dad and the conversations at home, because now, the big conversation is about Meharry College and Tennessee State's partnership they have, and they're currently searching for Black male students. And I mentioned on my Facebook post that, this conversation has to begin at home, and it just can't automatically say, here's a scholarship, here's an opportunity to get into science. It's not that easy. And I want to talk about the misconceptions that people have when it comes to, minorities going into science or even science. How can we combat these misconceptions? And, when do we communicate about, getting students or getting youth to actually look at science? And, how can we promote this in a greater stance to our youth and then to people in the community to even go, even some of us may feel that we're too old to get into science. So how can we promote this as a trend, or not really a trend, but as something that is promising? And we can go back to you, Ms. Booker.
Okay, so I think it definitely starts at home for sure. But I think we also have to consider that many parents don't have the foundation to kind of push the students into that awareness that these opportunities actually exist. I am a big fan of tracking as early as middle school in terms of once students have the foundational principles of reading and mathematics and science and whatever social studies or history there is, to cater to their interests. So I think on a grand scale, it's actually more of a systemic issue within education. But I think in our communities, it's important for students to have role models and people that look like them so they know that these opportunities are available, and actually getting them into places early enough to where you can spark their curiosity about things that are going on. And also having panels like these where students are able to go in and sit and listen to experiences of people of color. Earlier this year, I was on a panel in my role as a veterinary pathologist to some elementary school students, and they really had some fascinating questions about the day-to-day work that I did. So exposure is definitely number one. And that comes through, like you said, in the home, but in those instances where that's not available, the community at large is really important in helping to kind of create some programs that cater to the younger minorities so that they're aware, and to kind of craft some things going forward so that they can stay into it.
Jennifer, you want to tag on?
Say again?
I said you want to tag on to this question.
I think another misconception could also be that people in STEM fields may feel that we are equally diverse. And although we have come a long way and there is diversity, more so than what it was several years ago, I think there is still some level or degree of underrepresentation for people of color in STEM fields. As far as like recruitment or just advancement overall, promotions and whatnot. And I think if we had more of, minorities in the training leadership positions, that could somewhat increase, that diversity, because it would be kind of a equal share, so to speak, and they could kind of represent us to some degree as well.
And since you talked about the misrepresentation or the lack of opportunity somewhat, can we talk about the challenges that you've had, Jennifer, in the biotech field? Because I know it's a very small percentage in the field. What can you say has been your biggest challenge in the science field?
Well, currently there's not very many of us, especially in my area. We're on more of the research development side, and then you have the manufacturing side. And again, I think it just goes with, consistently having those trainings, diversity trainings. And right now, for us, being a Spanish-owned company is more so of a language barrier. So they have a certain way of thinking. And of course, everybody is unique in their own way and have their own set ideas, but that can be good in some instances, but can cause conflict also in other instances. And I've seen that be quite a challenge, just working in the area I'm in currently. So we just need, more trainings and just more open communication.
Okay, Ms. Wicker, what about in the veterinary field?
So I think that it's is, as Jennifer said, there's a very, very, very small percentage of Black and brown faces in the areas in which we work. And I think part of that is due to misconceptions that we aren't good enough. And we are going to take a whole lot more hand holding, or we need more training, or those kinds of things. So I speaking from personal experience, I've found myself sometimes feeling like I've had to work 2 or 3 times harder as some of my white colleagues to have the kind of recognition or be on the same type of level playing field that they're on. And also to make sure that my voice is heard and not lost in translation with everything else. So I think part of that is having the self-awareness to understand when you start to feel like that as a minority person, and know that you are just as good, if not better, than the person sitting next to you. It's interesting because I'm supervised in kind of have been for the last few years at this job and where I was previously. The people that were managing me or that were in leadership positions were over me did not have the same type of credentials that I have. And it's not all about credentials. It's not all about degrees. It's not all about letters, but there's a certain type of awareness that leaders need to have when managing a diverse group of people, or having management in leadership roles over people who are majority white. And then you have the few African-American, Indian, Asian people sprinkled therein. There needs to be a whole leadership approach. And the misconception is that everybody is the same. Everybody is on an equal type of playing field. A lot of places look to do more of the equality, more so than the equity. And there's a big gap there that needs to be reconciled at some point. So definite misconceptions about people of color not being good enough. Those typical stereotypes that are out there, if someone white raises an issue, it's okay. Let's see what we can do about it. If a minority raises an issue, they're upset, they're angry, they're always complaining. What's the problem? So it can get quite large in an hour is all we have. So I'll be quiet.
I know that's actually, you were actually hitting the next question that I have, because one of the things about it is we often do see students that are interested in science, and once they hit about ninth grade, it starts to become, okay, no, I don't want to be a scientist. I want to be a business owner, or I want to be an entrepreneur, or I want to be a dancer or a rapper or a musician. So they start moving and navigating two paths that don't necessarily associate with science. And let's talk about more with because you hit another area, because you said the lack of diversity in the field, but that also begins with the lack of teachers, the lack of science teachers. Did you both have any Black science teachers in your schools whenever you were coming up?
I did not. And I think, again, with you speaking on just the education, I think a lot of students and just deciding to go into STEM field get a little discouraged because of what they read or what they see, and they don't see a lot of people of color in this field. So that kind of discourages them in a sense too, I believe. I think, if they want to pursue that career in science, they should really, really stick with it regardless of what they hear. And I think the teachers should encourage and support them even more, even making them more visible on campuses. Students can, get into whatever organizations or programs that actually offer these courses, to just have a voice and just have more presence in this field on campuses as well.
True, so true. Dr. Wicker, can you add on to that and then talk about some approaches that leaders and teachers can take to, steer this conversation to students?
So funny question, the first part of the question. So I was a science teacher. So right after undergrad, I taught science, seventh grade science for 2 years before going to veterinary school. And I will tell you that in certain states, I'm not sure about all, but in South Carolina, teachers are bound by teaching a set of standards put forth by the state. And so to be sure that they cover those particular standards, teachers can actually get pretty creative with the lessons that they put forth for students to do on a day-to-day basis. And that goes back to making sure you meet your students where you are. I cannot talk about teachers without talking about how underpaid they are, but that's another discussion for another day. I come from a family of educators, and I am yeah, that's another discussion. So on the leadership part of your question, I think when I was coming up, summers were used for enrichment as well as students who needed to take courses in order to get clearance to pass to the next grade. And I'm not sure how many science enrichment programs there are in the communities these days. I think in terms of leading diverse students, it's a continual learning experience. And this is where one of my favorite pieces of leadership comes into play, and it's storytelling. So actually giving students the opportunity to feel like they belong in an area where they might not be the majority, welcoming their stories, whether they're familiar or unfamiliar, and just giving them a place to feel like they belong, even though it's clearly obvious to them that they're different. So I think making students feel welcome, asking about things such as Diwali, the Festival of Lights, to students of Indian American, students of Indian descent, South Asian descent, asking about different world holidays when they come up. We celebrate a lot of American holidays here, but we are a melting pot as a nation. So I think it's up to individual people who are in leadership positions to start taking small approaches, and then you'll see a grand impact on a large scale. So from what I can gather from sitting in a lot of seminars and panels and talks and lectures and discussions, people are looking for one person to come in and make a grand change and give you a formula. And it doesn't work that way. You have to craft leadership and inclusion activities, especially for young children, based on where you are in the moment and what's going on around you in society, because the social climate that we're in now is one where students need extra, they need extra attention, they need extra focus on some of the things that are going on outside of the actual academics. And if you can pull that in and integrate it as part of the curriculum, I'm quite sure you will see a better return on your investment as an educator than just solely leaning on a textbook or a software program to teach.
And that brings up a great point. And let's talk about, because I saw in the comments that, certain states, especially like Illinois, there are not that many students graduating in, there are not that many that are graduating from science education programs. And let's talk about your, undergraduate studies and, how you were placed into those majors and what was the conversation about matriculating out and becoming a scientist or becoming a doctor or becoming focused in that field. What was the outreach like whenever you were in the field, in the major? Did you get any opportunity for internships or any training that you felt like that you could take into the field, be confident in the skill of and in the field of science? We can go back to you, Jennifer.
As far as interns, That conversation never really came up with any of the teachers that I went, through. I wish I would have, just thinking back, but everything happens for a reason, of course. Um, and as far as everything else goes, I pretty much just kind of did my own step by step and my own research. I really didn't have a specific mentor or anyone that just kind of guided me. A lot of prayer and just a whole lot of researching and went from there.
Okay, so yours is primarily self-discovery. Dr. Wicker, what about you?
I got in contact with my undergraduate mentor when I was in high school, and it came particularly through a sports connection. So I went to a lot of football games on Saturdays at South Carolina State, and I fell in love with HBCU marching bands. And in high school, I played the clarinet, and boy, I got a kick out of those high steps and those tubas in the stands. I was like, I'm going to A&T, because that was the primary rival for SC State. And my dad and I had a nice little battle going back and forth. And so I applied and I got in touch with an undergraduate advisor who actually took his time and figured out what it was I wanted to do and walked me through the different programs that they offer there. And once I got in, there were things in place to help students along getting internships and going to summer programs. I think it also depends on what field you go in. So networking is another thing that's really, really important. So somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And the thing is to get out there what you want to do, why you want to do it, get your name in front of people, get your face in front of people. And from there, once you are called on for an interview or a phone call, you are able to shine in your own right as who you are and what you will bring to whatever program it is that you're applying for. But I think for me, things were in place where after your sophomore year, here are the programs that you can apply to. After your junior year, here are the places that you can apply. Here's the research you can do. So I was fortunate enough to have those opportunities in front of me. I'm keenly aware that that is not the case for everybody. So there needs to be some kind of interplay there to get those things in place.
How can school systems build relationships, or ideally, what will be an ideal partnership with a university that school systems can do and can build?
So when you talk about partnerships, it gets a little tricky because the green stuff is involved. So money, for sure, rules, for sure. And then you have to, I think, so it takes a little research, first of all, to determine what the need is in the area. And then you have to have a group of people who are willing from the start and committed to see it through, to develop a proposal and a plan B. And also to realize the limitations of what it is that you're trying to do, and how can you track the outcomes from the program. So any type of partnership that is put together should kind of be done so in the same way you do the scientific method almost, so that you can kind of track the progress from one year to the next, one student to the next, one quarter to the next, however you have it set up. There are lots of good programs that exist. I just don't think there are enough. And I think the parties on both ends have to have a similar goal in mind. You can have a similar goal at the end, but then you need to come together to work out the process. So how you get there, how you get your students there, what are you looking for, and who's going to fund it? that it always circles back around to money. If you're talking about students that are of the collegiate age, if you're talking about younger kids, you can easily put in place some shorter programs. Maybe even have somebody from the university nearby come in once a week to have a wet lab surrounding a certain whatever the topic is, or partner as you're building your curriculum for the semester or for the 90-day period. These are the things we're going to be working on. Is there anybody that would like to have some volunteer hours to come in and teach this lesson? I'm not sure of all the rules in terms of how the school districts operate, but what is clear is what has been happening is not effective. So it's now time to look for something else.
Yeah. Jennifer, can you talk on the, this is the wicked times of COVID, and we're in this pandemic, and many parents are at home. Kids are in attending school virtually, and how are you assisting your children with, this conversation on science, and what are some methods that you would get other parents to employ to to build this, this likeness or this fondness for science?
Basically, Dr. Wicker kind of touched on a lot of that, is just allowing the opportunities, those programs for these students, giving them the exposure to these science areas. And as for me, this whole virtual education has been quite a challenge. It's probably the biggest challenge out of many others that I've had to deal with so far. But you kind of know, as far as a parent, what skills your kids kind of are leaning towards, whether that be, okay, he or she is going to be more into the literature or language arts type fields, or teacher or whatever. He's going to be more into the math, science, technology kind of deal. I'm starting to see that with my oldest. And so being one that is in science field, at least I can have some knowledge to be able to provide or give him opportunities, give the both of them opportunities to be in that exposure of, these programs, whereas I didn't necessarily have that exposure just growing up. And so, yeah.
Can we talk about parent participation? And this is one of the things that my experience as a teacher, I see that sometimes that parents tend to not participate when it comes to science and math. They always want to say, hey, I helped my kid write a paper, or we were studying these spelling words or anything. But when it comes to science and math, they tend to run away from science and math. Let's talk about that. And because this is kind of where the gap is, because you don't have a lot of people who tend to be well versed in the subjects, and they have children. And so now the conversation is, we're focusing on kids, but can we focus on parents now? What can we do as educators to encourage parents to be more engaged with science?
Who's taking that question?
Well, you know what, Dr. Wicker, one of the things I want you to take it, because, for me, I don't ever hardly see any students say they want to be veterinarians. And this year was the first year that I had a student to actually tell me that she wants to be a vet in about 8 years. And I'm a post-secondary coach. And so for that, I felt like, all right, we need to have a conversation with the student parent Well, the parent didn't have any buy-in to it because she didn't know anything about the field. Let's talk about, what are some missing pieces or some gaps in even getting people to talk about, the life as a veterinarian, because, and I can honestly say, I don't ever recall any beyond the study of zoology in high school that wasn't a required course. So because of that, I think a lot of people that could have potentially be a veterinarian were not introduced to the idea of, animal science. So can we talk about that more? Because I feel like there needs to be an increase of studies in bio and zoology that can kind of like get kids focusing on the study of animals.
Yeah. So you made a very good point when you talked about a lot of parents not having the capacity to guide their children in the STEM fields because they don't have that experience themselves. And so that goes back to the initial comment I made earlier on about exposure and just having people that look like them in front of their faces. And granted, there, aren't a whole lot of minorities in STEM fields. They're way more than I think we realize, though. And it's up to those people who are responsible for the education of the children during the day to try and advocate for additional exposure. So I don't know if career days is still going on at school or not. The question now is, career day was back when I was in school. Why are we not having career week or a specific day out of every week dedicated to various careers that fall in line with whatever the subject matter is? And what I'm saying is probably problematic to those who've been in education for a while, because now you're talking about trying to change the system, and we all know how it is when you try to break down systemic norms. You face resistance and reasons why it doesn't work before you even try it. So I think it's bigger than just the parents. I think it more the way children learn these days is different from how I learned coming up. And I'm not super old, I'm 41. So when I was in school, I had a book. I would read and, answer questions. The teacher would go to Blackboard. There was no technology per se for us, except for the TV that you roll in on the big cart in the VCR. Well, now there's technology. There are programs out there that can actually simulation programs that can be integrated into the curriculum that will give a simulation to students of certain things. So the change requires a change in thought and a little more creativity in presenting the lessons. So the strategies of yesterday are antiquated and not relevant for today. And I think that becomes an issue because as soon as you say that and put that out into the atmosphere, people get offended rather than listening and trying to see how they can change, not a sweeping change instantly, but just over time, cater to the way that the students learn. Students today love to be in front of a screen. They love to do things with their hands. Can we get some video games that are science centered? Can we get some video games that are math centered? The conversation needs to be had, and I'm sure it is, but like I said, people always want to defend their old strategies of doing things because this is the way we've always done it. That's the universal answer. This is the way we've always done it, and this is what works. Well, it doesn't work. Look at the data. People love data until it shines a light on them and shows them where the change needs to happen. and then there's an issue. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that response. And I just saw someone in the comments say yes whenever you said, we need more games that are science driven. And I agree. I often want to see and engage the conversation with my students about science more so because it's like, when this whole pandemic went down, they did not understand what exactly was happening. And nobody, and I think it was more so like, let's just shut down and we have a pandemic now. And then so a lot of the kids were at home versus, this conversation like, all right, COVID triggers, the immune system. And, we weren't having those, realistic conversations with kids about what exactly is COVID. And I was really adamant about making sure that the students that I was working with at the time understood what COVID was and then how long these strands have existed because, all of a sudden it was COVID-19, but nobody really realized that, COVID has been around since, 2003 and that it's been in study since 2003. So we were really, pushing like, all right, COVID, this is a new thing. No, it's not new. There's 19 strains of it. And this is something that we should have been having a conversation with our kids. And I feel like they placed it too far with the teachers and gave the teachers way too much responsibility to handle this pandemic. I really think it should have been geared toward scientists. We should have had more scientists in the classroom. We should have had more scientists engaged in conversations with, school leaders and building from there. And that's really how we can do that. And, bring in the gaps and fill in the gaps is by bringing in professionals, as you're saying, like career fairs. That's really important. And especially when you have a teacher that's trained for, K-12, and they may not know much about zoology, because I would love to know how COVID impacts animals. And, that's another thing. We didn't really have a big conversation on, pets and how people can, protect their animals from having COVID as well. Those are conversations that didn't happen initially that should have been driven by, through education. Jennifer, can you talk about, I want to change up the dynamic of this conversation real quick. Let's talk about accomplishments in science. What are some great accomplishments that you've seen, Jennifer? And then Dr. Ricker, I want you to, give us some examples of your accomplishments in the field and how, going from college, that you continue to reinvent yourselves.
Accomplishments in this field. Let's see. I have been doing this for going on 17 years, so that list might be kind of long, but I think the most recent one, I'll just say, is a study that we had to work on, and it was like high priority, and we had to meet certain criteria. And this was very, very tedious and very, very involved. So most of our drug products, I will just start off with that, is plasma derived. And they go through a series of tests. So we are in support of our manufacturing facility. On my side of things, we do all the studies, the research. We come up with the new methods to make the products more pure. We actually carry out all of the virus inactivation removal processes that are pretty much mimicking the same process that has to go on in manufacturing. This particular study had to meet a certain deadline, and it was pretty fast paced. And one experiment itself alone was probably about a 4-day process. And that was just one, going from day 1 to day 4. So it was pretty extensive. Overall, we did achieve the data that we needed. We met the criteria that we needed in the amount of time frame that was given to us. So that was probably a big accomplishment as far as my job goes. There are others, but for the sake of time, that's the main one that kind of stands out right now.
Okay, Dr. Wicker.
I have three big ones that I'll cover fairly quickly. So the first accomplishment is pretty simple. My first accomplishment for being in the field of science is actually sticking with it. Because you can easily be in an environment where you question that the work that you're doing, is it really what you want to do just because of the culture of the place? And you realize very quickly, no, the work is very rewarding. So yes, it is still the love that it used to be. It's the environment that you're in. So once you change your environment and you change the culture around you, you realize that the work is still the same phenomenal work that you've always done. So that's my biggest accomplishment, sticking with it. My second accomplishment, I think, is the rewarding returns I get on my job. So just personally, I know quite a few people who are affected by autoimmune disease, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, systemic lupus. And every study I read as a pathologist is different. The tissues that I evaluate under the microscope are the same, but they've been treated with different compounds. And a lot of these compounds are trying to get to market to help those people that I know with these autoimmune diseases. So when they call and talk to me about their conditions or about how they're doing, it feels good to be able to say, hang in there, we're working on it. We're trying to get you something. There are things out there on the market, don't give up. Yes, you should enter this clinical trial. Yes, send me the information for this drug, I'll read it over. And because of the knowledge that I have about the diseases, just from a basic higher level academic college background, and the skills that I was given in college and beyond to be able to research and read journal articles and extrapolate results and discussion points from that, I'm able to help them. So my job as a pathologist bleeds over into my personal life in being able to offer assistance to friends and relatives of mine. And then lastly, it's indirectly related to the work I do. I'm also a mentor at Michigan State for a grant that I'm an grant board member for minority students in science education. So we get students from all over during the summer who come in to do research studies, and we meet, and I kind of help mentor them through their scientific processes, and they have a big presentation at the end of the summer. So I give back to Michigan State because they've given me so much in terms of my pathology training and my PhD work. And I was honored as the 2020 recipient for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the College of Veterinary Medicine in 2020. Completely unexpected. You know, you go about this job day to day, doing the work that you do because you love it. And then to actually be recognized for it, it was pretty awesome and humbling. So
congratulations, that is awesome. Well, we're toward the end. I want to make sure that I mention to the Illinois teachers that you will receive your credit if you once you participate. There will be a follow-up questionnaire that will be sent to you from Epiphany LLC, and you will once you respond to the questionnaire, you can then receive your CEUs. All right. Final question or final comments that we want to make for our teachers. And these are your own final thoughts. And we'll begin with you, Dr. Wicker.
Oh, final thoughts. Yes. So thank you for definitely hosting this series. It's really good to get people who don't know each other in the same space to kind of lean into some of those issues that are very pressing. I think a lot of times we get in our bubble and we're surrounded by people who are familiar to us, who want to tell us what we want to hear and not challenge the status quo. And just keep going on with the same old ideas. So I just want to encourage everyone to think out of the box. You know, Put the box on the curb with next week's recycling and leave it there. You know, these children that we are responsible for raising and for teaching, they do have minds of their own. They're capable of independent thinking. I think it's up to us as leaders and parents and teachers in the community at large to help foster their interests and make sure that they're exposed to everything that they are able to have at their reach. They shouldn't be bound by limitations that are put on them because of race, class, socioeconomic status, or any of the intersectional qualities that are of discussion today. So just stay encouraged, stay the course, and challenge the status quo just a bit, and you may be surprised at the outcome.
All right, thank you. Ms. Carter, your final thought?
I would just say to all the students out there who are, in thoughts of pursuing any career in the STEM field, keep pursuing it. Stick to, your heart's desire. That desire is there for a reason. And for all the teachers, encourage these students, encourage, all the children out there who definitely want to be in this field. Like, we as the panelists were discussing, you don't have a very high percentage of us out there. So definitely continue to encourage all the students. Students, continue to pursue your dreams and, let it all prevail.
All right. And again, Epiphany centers on uplifting youth in many ways. And we would like to thank Epiphany and our partners, Teach Illinois, for joining us today. So thank you, Dr. Barbie Wicker and Ms. Jennifer Carter. Thank you for your participation, and to everyone that joined us. Thank you for listening. And we would like to thank Kiera for this opportunity and for this space. And have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well, everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good job, sir.
Hold on, Desmond. It's no more, it's not live anymore.